I am a retired doctor, and after years of experience in the field, I've seen enough to know that the human heart can carry much more than just love. It also carries wounds, and some of these wounds take years to heal, if they ever do. In fact, some scars run so deep that they silently shape the rest of our lives, often in ways we never expect. When I was practicing, I often found myself counseling elderly patients who felt disconnected from the people they once held dear. They no longer found joy in social gatherings or in spending time with friends and family. I could see the loneliness in their eyes, but what I didn't always see, what they didn't always say, was the hidden pain. That pain wasn't simply the result of aging, as so many people assume. It was the weight of past betrayals, the quiet toll that the years of broken trust, misjudgments, and emotional wounds had taken on their spirits. The truth is, many older adults withdraw from social circles not because they've stopped caring, but because something inside them has changed. It's not apathy, it's wisdom. The kind of wisdom that comes only after years of being hurt, of seeing how fragile human connections can be, and how easily people can disappoint you. As we age, we begin to realize that not everyone who comes into our lives has earned the right to stay there. Not every relationship is worth the emotional investment, and more often than not, the ones who hurt us the most are the ones we trusted the most. I remember one patient in particular, Chloe, an 81-year-old woman who used to throw weekly dinner parties, filling her home with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and music. But as time passed, things changed. One friend broke her trust, another disappeared after the death of her husband. And while Chloe didn't have a single, dramatic experience that led her to pull away, it was the accumulation of these small betrayals that hardened her heart. Over the years, the smiles faded, the dinners stopped, and now she preferred the quiet of her own home. She didn't dislike people. But she had learned, as so many of us do, that peace of mind comes from distancing yourself from those who have shown they cannot be trusted. What Chloe understood, that many others do not, is that distance doesn't always come from hate or anger. It comes from self-protection, from an understanding that not everyone is worthy of your time, your love, or your energy. She had poured herself into relationships over the years, offering love and support to people who, in the end, didn't deserve it. That's a hard lesson, but it's one that comes with age. When you've lived long enough to see how easily people can change or disappear from your life, you start to guard your heart. You start to understand that the most precious thing you can offer someone is not your time, but your trust, and that trust, it must be earned. This idea of emotional fatigue, what psychologists call relational fatigue, is something I saw often in my practice. It's a feeling that becomes more pronounced as we age. You've given so much, been there for so many people, and yet, it seems like the more you give, the more drained you become. Relationships that once felt easy and natural start to feel like a burden. You stop putting yourself out there, not because you've lost the ability to love, but because you've learned the hard way that some people can take and take, without ever giving back. So you begin to pull away, not out of resentment, but out of the need to protect yourself. It's a painful realization, but a necessary one. You begin to ask yourself, who in my life has truly earned the right to be close to me? And the answer isn't always what you expect. As we age, we realize that not everyone is deserving of the emotional investment it takes to maintain a close relationship. And this is not a failure on your part, it's simply a reflection of the wisdom you've gained from years of living, loving, and being hurt. But here's the thing that many don't understand. Stepping back from these relationships, creating distance, is not a bad thing. It's not about cutting people off or becoming bitter, it's about being discerning. It's about understanding that not all relationships are worth holding on to. It's about choosing who you let into your life, carefully and with intention. And sometimes, the best choice is to guard your heart and protect your peace. So, if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt that quiet exhaustion from giving too much to people who haven't given you the same, I want you to think about something. Maybe, just maybe, you're not being cold or distant. Maybe, you're simply being wise. You're learning to protect what matters most, your peace, your energy, and your heart. Now, before I continue, I ask you to consider something. Do you think that as we age, it's natural to pull back from others and focus more on our own well-being? Or do you believe that isolating yourself is a sign of something deeper, like fear of being hurt again? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please choose an answer and let me know if you agree with all B. It's natural to pull back from others as we age. B. Isolating oneself is a sign of deeper fear of being hurt again. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us keep producing more content like this, and I'd love to share more insights with you on topics that truly matter. Thank you for being here, and stay with me as we dive deeper into these important discussions. As a retired doctor, I've spent much of my life observing the inner workings of the human heart both physically and emotionally. Over the years, I've seen how the years wear on us, how life's experiences mold our perspectives, and how, in our later years, we begin to crave something different from what we once sought. One of the most profound changes that often comes with age is a shift in our need for social interaction. When I was still practicing, I often found myself in the company of older patients who, at one point, thrived on constant social interaction. They were the life of the party, the ones who always had a crowd around them, always willing to chat with anyone who would listen. But as time wore on, something changed. I began to see that many of them started withdrawing from the very social engagements they had once cherished. Henry had spent his life talking to people he could converse with anyone, anytime, about anything. His house was often filled with guests, laughter, and lively discussions. He loved the energy of social interactions, the buzz of voices, the sense of connection. But over the years, that energy began to feel like something else. It no longer brought him joy. He began to skip family gatherings, avoid large parties, and turn down invitations to social events. When I asked him why, he simply smiled and said, "I'm done talking just to fill the air." What Henry had come to realize, and what I've seen many older adults experience, is that as we grow older, our emotional energy becomes more precious. The constant need to impress, to perform, to be on for others begins to feel like a heavy burden. The small talk, the idle chatter that once felt natural, now felt draining. It wasn't that Henry disliked people, he simply wanted something more. He wanted conversations with meaning, with depth, conversations that didn't require him to be anything other than himself. I believe that this shift is one of the most profound changes we undergo as we age. We start to realize that time is finite, and with it, the energy we spend. We begin to value quiet moments, meaningful conversations, and authentic connections more than the endless social obligations we once embraced. I've often heard it said that as we age, we become less patient with the world around us. But I believe that's not quite right. It's not a lack of patience, it's a deepening of understanding. We no longer have the energy to waste on superficial interactions. We've seen enough of life to know what truly matters, and what truly matters is peace. For many, the desire for peace over idle chatter becomes a form of self-care. It's about finding balance, setting boundaries, and protecting our mental and emotional well-being. When we're younger, we often feel like we need to constantly be in motion, always engaging, always socializing. But as we age, we begin to recognize that real peace doesn't come from being constantly surrounded by people or filled with noise. It comes from the stillness, from those quiet moments alone or with just a few close friends who truly understand us. It's in these moments of solitude that we find clarity, and we begin to reconnect with ourselves on a deeper level. I remember one elderly woman, Margaret, who had always been the heart of every gathering. She was the one everyone turned to for advice, for support, for a good laugh. But as she grew older, she became more and more selective about the company she kept. She would say, "I've done the big family dinners, I've hosted the parties. Now I just want to sit and enjoy a cup of tea with someone who doesn't need me to entertain them." Margaret's words stuck with me. She wasn't withdrawing out of bitterness or fear. She was simply recognizing her own needs and honoring them. She knew that what she needed now was peace, not the chaos of constant socializing. This shift isn't always understood by those around us. People may see it as isolation, as withdrawal, and they may worry. I've had patients like Margaret and Henry who were questioned by their children, their friends, even by their own minds. "Why don't you want to go out? Why aren't you socializing as much?" But what they didn't realize, what many don't realize, is that this desire for peace isn't a rejection of others, it's an embrace of a deeper truth. We've lived long enough to know that not every gathering brings joy, not every conversation is fulfilling, and sometimes the best company is our own. It's a lesson I learned early in my own life, long before I became a doctor. When I was younger, I thrived on socializing, on being around people all the time. But as the years passed, I began to notice a shift within myself. I grew weary of small talk. I no longer felt the need to be at every event, to engage in every conversation. I realized that my true peace came from moments of solitude, from quiet reflections, from engaging in conversations that truly mattered. And it was in these moments that I felt most connected to myself, to my own truth. So, as I sit here now, retired and reflecting on my years of practice, I can say with certainty that this is one of the most valuable lessons life teaches us as we age. The desire for peace is not a weakness. It is not a sign of growing distant or cold, it is a sign of wisdom. The desire to protect our peace, to seek out genuine connections, and to set boundaries around our emotional energy is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be celebrated. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself stepping back from social events or declining invitations because you craved peace instead of noise? If you've ever felt this shift, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below with your answer. A yes, I crave peace more than ever. B no, I still enjoy being around people as much as I always have. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more content like this. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us keep bringing these important discussions to the forefront. As a retired doctor, I've spent decades working with people from all walks of life, but one thing that has always stood out to me is the profound sense of isolation many older adults feel. It's a subtle kind of loneliness, one that sneaks up quietly, almost unnoticed, until it's too late. I've seen it in my patients, heard it in their voices, and witnessed it in their eyes. It's not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the far more painful kind, the loneliness of being misunderstood. This particular feeling, the sensation that those around you no longer truly see you for who you are, is one that seems to come with age. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small moments, tiny, seemingly insignificant interactions where you say something and notice the response is more out of obligation than genuine interest. Over time, it becomes more pronounced. You speak, and no one listens. You share a story, and the conversation quickly shifts elsewhere, as if your words didn't even matter. I've heard so many elderly patients express this feeling, and it's something that can be incredibly difficult to explain to those who haven't experienced it. Take Ella, for example, a 79-year-old woman who was once a vibrant, engaging school teacher. She loved spending time with her younger relatives, telling them stories about her childhood, about raising her 5 children, about working full-time while still finding time to volunteer. These were stories she was proud of, stories that shaped her, that told the tale of a life well lived. But as the years went on, those stories began to fall on deaf ears. Her children, her nieces and nephews, no longer seemed interested. They'd smile politely, nod, and then check their phones, lost in their own worlds. At first, Ella thought it was just a phase. Perhaps they were busy, distracted, but then it happened again and again. And it wasn't just the younger generation, her peers too started to pull away. Conversations became more shallow, more transactional. She began to feel like a ghost in a room full of people. This isn't about a lack of love or care from others. It's not about the people around her suddenly becoming callous or uncaring. It's about something much more complex, the feeling of being invisible, the sense that the wisdom and experience you've spent a lifetime gathering no longer holds any value. The younger generation, in their busy lives, have little time or energy to listen. And your peers, too, are often distracted by the same pressures and stresses that come with aging. But for someone who has lived a full life, these small dismissals can feel like a profound rejection. What Ella and so many others have experienced is what psychologists often refer to as emotional invalidation. It's not the overt rejection or harsh criticism that we often imagine when we think of being misunderstood. It's the subtle dismissal, the lack of acknowledgement of your feelings and experiences. It happens when you share something meaningful and the response is either absent or dismissive. Over time, this builds up, and the emotional toll can be just as significant, if not more so, than outright rejection. I've seen this firsthand in my practice with patients like Thomas, an 82-year-old widower. Thomas had spent his life as a successful lawyer, a respected man in his community. He had stories to tell, wisdom to share. But over time, he began to notice that when he shared his thoughts at family gatherings, his children and grandchildren would zone out. They would smile and nod, but they weren't really listening. He could see their eyes wandering to their phones or away from him, and it hurt him deeply. He started withdrawing, not because he no longer cared for them, but because he felt that his words, his experiences, no longer held any weight. He felt irrelevant. The thing is, this sense of being misunderstood isn't just about words, it's about the unspoken message that we're no longer valuable. It's about the slow, steady erosion of self-worth that comes from feeling unseen, unheard. As we grow older, we begin to realize that the world has moved on, and that's a painful realization to confront. It's as if we've been left behind, not because we chose to be, but because we simply stopped fitting into the picture the way we once did. The language of our lives, the experiences we hold dear, no longer resonate with those around us in the same way. And when that happens, it's easy to retreat into ourselves, to feel like we have nothing more to offer. But I want to say something important here. Just because others fail to see you doesn't mean you've lost value. It simply means that you've outgrown certain conversations, certain relationships. It doesn't mean that you are irrelevant. It means that you are deeper, wiser, and more discerning in how you choose to share your time and energy. And that's okay. It's not about forcing your way into a world that no longer understands you. It's about finding the spaces where you can be truly seen, truly heard, even if those spaces are smaller or fewer in number. As we age, we must also come to terms with the fact that some relationships naturally fade. It's not always a result of conflict or misunderstanding. Sometimes, it's simply a matter of life's evolving pace. Our priorities shift, our interests change, and sometimes the people around us don't keep up with that change. But that doesn't diminish the value of the experiences we've shared, nor does it lessen our worth. It simply means that we are evolving, and in doing so, we might find that we need to seek out new connections that are based on deeper understanding and mutual respect. Now, I ask you this. Have you ever felt like the people around you no longer truly understand you? Do you sometimes feel like your experiences and wisdom are being overlooked, and that you've become invisible in a world that's moved on without you? If so, I encourage you to reflect on this. Is the solution to seek validation from those who may no longer be able to offer it, or is it to find the spaces where you can be truly heard, where your voice matters? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections are invaluable, and I'd love to hear how you navigate this feeling of being misunderstood. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights on these deeply personal topics that affect us all. As a retired doctor, I've witnessed many patients experience a transformation over the course of their lives, especially as they entered their later years. One of the most painful and complex feelings I encountered was the fear of being a burden. It's a quiet fear, a lingering doubt that settles deep inside the heart, and it's something I've seen in more patients than I can count. It's not a fear that is often spoken of, but it's one that subtly shapes the decisions and actions of many older adults. This fear doesn't come from a place of selfishness or laziness, but from a deep-seated sense of respect for others. As people grow older, they begin to feel like they've lived a full life, and they don't want to impose on those who are younger, those who still have so much ahead of them. The fear is rooted in the idea that their needs, their declining health, and their aging bodies are too much for the people they love. They begin to worry that their presence will be a burden, something their children, grandchildren, or friends will have to take on reluctantly, out of duty rather than love. I remember a patient of mine named Herbert, an 84-year-old widower. When I first met him, he was still living independently, but his mobility had begun to decline. His daughter and her family would visit him regularly, bringing food, offering help, but over time, I noticed Herbert's behavior changing. He started turning down invitations. He declined help, even when it was offered. And when I asked him why, he said something that struck me deeply. I don't want to be a burden. I know they have their own lives to live. I don't want them reshaping their entire world for me. His words were not spoken out of stubbornness, but out of a sense of deep respect for his family. He didn't want to inconvenience them, even if it meant isolating himself from their love and care. Herbert's fear wasn't unique. I've heard variations of his sentiments from countless other elderly patients. They all expressed the same underlying fear, that their aging bodies, their physical limitations, and their dependence on others might take too much from those they care about. They felt that the younger generation, with their busy lives, careers, and families, would eventually grow tired of offering help. They were afraid of becoming a burden, of taking up too much space, both physically and emotionally, in the lives of their loved ones. The thing about this fear is that it's not entirely irrational. As we age, we become more dependent on others, whether it's for help with daily tasks, managing our health, or simply having someone to talk to. This shift can be difficult to accept. Many of us have spent our lives being the ones others rely on, the caregivers, the providers, the strong, dependable ones. To suddenly find ourselves needing others, asking for help, can feel like a loss of control. It can feel like a betrayal of the very independence we've worked so hard to maintain. But here's the truth. No one wants to be a burden, but at the same time, love and connection are at the heart of what makes life worth living. As we age, we need to allow ourselves to accept the help of others without guilt. The fear of being a burden often causes us to isolate ourselves, to turn down help, and to withdraw into our own worlds. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the very relationships that are meant to sustain us during our later years. I've seen time and time again that when people push others away out of fear of being a burden, they often end up feeling more lonely and isolated. Herbert, for example, eventually admitted that by pushing his daughter away, he wasn't just protecting her from the burden of caring for him, he was also denying himself the warmth of their relationship. When he stopped accepting help, he also stopped allowing them to care for him in the way that love demands. His daughter wanted to be there for him. She wanted to support him, to show him the same kindness and care that he had always shown her. But by holding back, Herbert inadvertently created a wall between them, one that caused more harm than good. As I reflect on my years of practice, I realize that the fear of being a burden is often the result of a lifetime of self-reliance and independence. But as we age, we must learn to shift our perspective. We must recognize that being cared for by others is not a sign of weakness, nor is it a burden. It is a natural part of life. Just as we once cared for others, now it is our turn to be cared for, and in doing so, we enrich our relationships. Allowing others to help us doesn't diminish our worth, it enhances it. It deepens our connections, allows us to experience love and care in a new way, and teaches us humility, grace, and acceptance. The fear of being a burden often comes from a place of deep love and concern for others. But it is important to understand that the people who care for us are not doing so out of obligation. They are doing it because they love us, because they want to be there for us, just as we have been there for them. The truth is, none of us are meant to go through life alone. We are all interconnected, and we all need each other. The more we allow ourselves to be open to receiving help, the more we enrich the lives of those who care for us. So, I ask you this, have you ever found yourself turning down help from those who care about you simply because you feared being a burden? Have you ever withdrawn from others, afraid that your needs might be too much for them to bear? If so, I encourage you to reflect on this. Is it possible that by allowing others to care for you, you are not only helping them feel needed, but also strengthening your bond with them? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you navigate this fear and what it means to you to be cared for by others. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Your support helps us continue creating valuable content that encourages open conversation on these deeply important topics. As a retired doctor, I've spent a significant part of my career listening to my patients, really listening to them. I've heard their fears, their worries, and their deepest regrets. But there's one theme that always stands out in the later years of life, something that's both surprising and deeply profound. It's the joy of solitude. Now, you might wonder how joy and solitude can possibly belong in the same sentence. After all, we often think of solitude as something negative, something to be avoided. We associate it with loneliness, isolation, and a sense of being cut off from the world. But as I grew older, I began to see that there is a very different side to solitude, especially as we enter the later chapters of our lives. In fact, solitude can be one of the most rewarding experiences if we allow it to be. I remember one of my patients, James, a man I had known for many years. He was an 82-year-old former businessman who had always been the life of the party. His home had been a place where friends gathered, laughter was constant, and conversations were full of energy. James thrived in social settings, and for a long time, he felt incomplete without the company of others. But as the years went by, I noticed a shift in him. He stopped hosting gatherings, stopped going to every social event, and began spending more and more time on his own. I once asked him what had changed, and his answer was simple but profound. I've found that I don't need to be surrounded by people all the time to feel fulfilled. I've discovered something in solitude that I never knew existed. This was a revelation. For someone like James, who had lived much of his life in the company of others, the idea that solitude could bring joy seemed almost counterintuitive. But the more I reflected on his words, the more I realized that what he was speaking about wasn't isolation in the conventional sense. It was the peaceful solitude that comes when we finally stop seeking validation from the world around us and begin to connect with ourselves on a deeper level. In my years of practice, I have come to understand that, for many older adults, the pressure to constantly be surrounded by others fades with time. This isn't because they don't enjoy the company of others, but because they've come to realize something important. Being alone doesn't have to mean being lonely. In fact, solitude often brings a sense of freedom and peace that can't be found in the noise and chaos of social gatherings. As we age, we begin to appreciate the quiet moments. We no longer feel the need to fill every silence with words or every day with plans. We begin to understand that our worth doesn't depend on the number of people around us or how much attention we receive. We start to find comfort in the stillness, in the ability to simply be. I've seen this shift in so many of my older patients, especially those who once feared solitude. They begin to embrace it, not out of necessity or desperation, but out of a deep understanding that it offers something essential: time for self-reflection, time to appreciate the beauty of the world around them, and time to simply exist without the need for constant validation. For some, this journey into solitude is a gradual one. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. The quiet feels too loud, the space too empty. But over time, that discomfort transforms into something else entirely. It becomes a sanctuary, a place where one can reconnect with their own thoughts and desires, where the noise of the world fades into the background. And what remains is clarity. It's in these moments of solitude that we are able to truly hear ourselves, to understand what we really want, what we truly need, and what brings us peace. I recall another patient, Margaret, who had always been an extrovert, always surrounded by friends and family. She told me that, as she grew older, she started feeling more and more overwhelmed by the constant demands of social interaction. She was never alone in the traditional sense. She had family around her, people who loved her. But still, she found herself craving time alone. Time where she didn't have to be anyone for anyone. Time where she could simply breathe, think, and reflect. She told me, "I've spent my whole life taking care of others, doing for others, entertaining others. Now, I want to take care of myself. I want to enjoy the quiet, the peace of my own company." Margaret's words stayed with me. There's something incredibly liberating about allowing ourselves to step away from the expectations of others and just be. It's not about rejecting social interactions or becoming reclusive. It's about recognizing that there is a balance, a need for both connection and solitude. And as we age, we begin to find that balance. We begin to understand that solitude isn't a punishment or something to fear. It's a choice, a beautiful, empowering choice that allows us to regain our sense of self, to reconnect with our inner peace, and to simply enjoy the present moment without the need for external validation. One of the most striking things I've learned in my years as a doctor is that many people don't truly understand the value of solitude until they are faced with the prospect of aging. The younger generations often fear solitude, seeing it as a sign of weakness or failure. But as we grow older, we begin to understand that solitude is not a reflection of our worth. It's a reflection of our strength, our ability to be content in our own company, and our recognition that we don't need to constantly seek the approval or attention of others. We have lived long enough to know that peace comes from within, not from external sources. As I look back on my own life, I see how much I have learned to appreciate solitude. In my younger years, I was often too busy to sit still. I was constantly moving, constantly engaged with others. But now, in the quiet of my retirement, I find that solitude has become a refuge. It is where I reflect, where I find solace, and where I reconnect with the deepest parts of myself. It is not loneliness, it is the joy of being with oneself. If there is one lesson I can offer from my years of practice and life experience, it is this.
Solitude, when embarrassing, can be one of the most powerful non-yielding aspects of growing older. It is not something to be feared, but something to be cherished. In solitude, we find clarity, peace, and a deeper connection to ourselves. And perhaps, in the end, that is the greatest gift we can give ourselves in time to simply be. It is like to live you with and thought, so you embrace solitude as an source of peace.
Or do you still find it difficult to be alone with your thoughts? I'd love to hear your reflections. Please share them in the comments below. And, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful conversations. As we reflect on the different stages of life, it's essential to recognize the profound impact that aging has not only on our bodies but on our minds and hearts as well. Each stage comes with its own set of challenges, but also its own set of revelations. The lessons we learn as we grow older are sometimes hidden beneath the surface of our daily lives, only becoming clear when we step back and look at them with new eyes. The truth is, aging is not just about physical decline. It's also about gaining wisdom, about understanding ourselves in deeper ways, and about learning to navigate life with a sense of peace and purpose. Throughout our lives, we spend so much time focused on external accomplishments, on building careers, on raising families, on keeping up with the demands of the world around us. But as we get older, we begin to see the limitations of these pursuits. The endless striving for validation, the constant need to be busy, the pressure to keep up with others, it all starts to fade into the background. What remains is a quieter truth. We can only find true happiness when we begin to honor the internal aspects of life, our peace, our relationships, and our self-awareness. One of the most powerful realizations that comes with aging is that we begin to value peace over noise, solitude over constant interaction, and wisdom over achievement. Many of us experience this shift as we age. It's not a loss, but a gain. As we distance ourselves from the rush of society and the noise of constant socializing, we find that there is an inner calm, a deep well of peace that we can tap into. And it's in this place of stillness that we find clarity about what truly matters to us. Take the example of solitude, a concept that many people fear, especially in their later years. Solitude isn't about being lonely or isolated. It's about giving yourself the space to reflect, to listen to your inner voice, and to reconnect with what is most important to you. As we get older, we begin to realize that we don't need the constant presence of others to feel valued. We find that we can be perfectly content in our own company, learning to appreciate the quiet, the stillness, and the time we now have to engage in activities that nurture our soul. However, there is also an undeniable truth about aging. We can never stop growing. We might slow down physically, but the mind is always open to new insights, new perspectives, and new ways of being. And this is where the real challenge lies, not in the physical aging process, but in our ability to continue learning and evolving as individuals. Life doesn't stop teaching us just because we've lived for many years. The key is to stay open to these lessons and to apply them in ways that benefit both ourselves and those around us. So, how do we apply this newfound wisdom in our daily lives? First, we need to embrace the quiet. Instead of fearing it, we should welcome it as an opportunity for growth and reflection. Spend time alone, whether it's through meditation, journaling, or simply taking a walk in nature so you can hear your own thoughts, listen to your own heart, and gain clarity about your life's direction. Second, we should embrace the relationships that truly matter. As we age, we realize that not every social interaction is meaningful, and not every connection is worth pursuing. Focus on those relationships that bring you joy, peace, and understanding, and let go of the ones that drain your energy or cause stress. Finally, remember that it's okay to ask for help when you need it. Don't let the fear of being a burden prevent you from reaching out to others. Life is about connection, and we are all meant to lean on each other from time to time. As we move forward, let's take these lessons and apply them in our lives. Let us strive for inner peace, let us focus on the relationships that bring us joy, and let us always be open to learning and growing, no matter our age. The more we embrace the wisdom that comes with aging, the more we allow ourselves to live a life that is rich in meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Here's a simple question for you to reflect on. Do you find joy in solitude, or does the idea of being alone make you uncomfortable? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights could help others reflect on their own journeys. And if you found this content valuable, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you can stay updated on future videos. Your support is incredibly important to us, and it motivates me to keep creating valuable content for you. Even though I am getting older myself, I am dedicated to sharing the wisdom I've gained throughout my life, and your contributions, whether big or small, help ensure that I can continue doing so. Thank you for your support.